or any of that. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, I mean, the whole idea, like we were talking before, is, we want to be able to help people. A lot of this came from conversations that we had all had about, we are as engaged, regular normie guys as I know. Mm-hmm. And it's really difficult to find information on candidates. Mostly the voter pamphlet is like, you write a biography about yourself, and then that's all I have to go off of, right? Mm-hmm. And so it was really frustrating to feel like we wanted to be informed, engaged voters and not having any real resource, for people to actually fully flesh out their positions, to be, get clarity on what somebody actually wants to do.
But I guess and I was super frustrated. There's no question this election cycle, super frustrated with the different candidates that were out there and pretending to be something that they weren't. Mm-hmm. And not really understanding, looking at the full body of a person, because if you were to do background or look into what they've done in the past, that would have told a different story. And so they're only listening to things that are very current, or they're just frustrated with a particular person, and so they're voting not necessarily for that race, but to get rid of a person.
Sure.
So when you look at the port race in Centralia, you have Julie Shafley, who has 35 years business experience, mm-hmm. Incredible lady. And then you have Allie Picard, who was fired from her job. Well, let go.
Yeah.
From her job. I shouldn't say fired. But then what she did last year with the Lewis County political cartoons, where we had staff that quit their job because she made body image, like things that depicted them in a negative light. Yeah. So, this one lady she made into a fat dragon. Then another person who's actually elected into a bullfrog, big bullfrog. Then another person into, I don't know if it was a warthog, and the warthog bled everywhere. And this is the one that actually quit their job.
Yeah.
He had a disability. We'll just call it a disability.
Right.
And so she made fun of that.
Yeah.
And he ended up quitting his job, and a guy that had worked for the county for, 30 years. And so then even when she would do her debates, people wouldn't even fact check. They just did not care. She said things like, well, when I ran the fair, we were the most profitable fair in the last, 2 decades. She didn't run the fair.
Right.
And so that's where, if you're looking at the body of work, people weren't voting based on the actual substance of the person. They were voting just because they didn't like a person that had no connection really to the race. You weren't electing that person.
Yeah.
And so that was frustrating. And then you have the city council race, where you had a person that was running that quit. She was on there when Leah Sizemore, when her name was Leah DeRude, she was on there. Mm-hmm. She quit. She was going through some family issues, and she has a different last name, so that could probably tell you the issues. But then you have a self-professed socialist, and he's at the No Kings rallies. He's all on Saturday. You can find him at Washington Park holding a sign. But just the things that he stands for are pretty terrible. And when it comes to law enforcement, he would rather have less law enforcement and more counselors.
Right. Yeah.
And so
idea.
So you're electing that, and people aren't looking into it. Now, granted, that specific district, I was worried because I felt that district would probably lean more towards him in the end. And I mean, obviously I was right. He won by 12 votes.
Yeah.
And
12 votes. So, like, this is one of the things, that we talked about. And I don't know if you can look this up for us, but how many registered voters or people who are of voting
54,000
right,
in Lewis County
that are registered or are of voting age?
Registered voters. Okay. I think we have 87,000 people, and there's 54,000 registered voters in Lewis County.
Okay.
But I think you would have to actually, break that down even smaller to Centralia. and then you would have to
Sure.
break it down even further into a district. It was interesting. Leah was down by 1 vote after Wednesday. And so then she went and started looking at all the rejected ballots, was able to find 6, get them turned, or get the people to go and make sure that they're, hey, I did vote.
Yeah.
Let's make sure that it counts.
Yeah.
And so she turns the tide, but when the drop actually happens, the next one, now she's down by 12.
Yeah.
Which I thought was interesting because typically, who votes last? It's typically Republicans.
Yeah.
It's not me.
That's probably me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was.
That's me.
Who's picking it up somehow?
Really?
Yeah.
Well, it was vibrating on the desk.
Yeah.
So,
But
yeah.
but typically the Republicans would vote last on the day of. I love doing that. I love
Yeah.
holding my ballot because I want to make sure that I get. If a candidate's going to send something, I want to get it. I want to see what they're actually doing,
Yeah.
what their message actually is, and wait to the very last minute because you never know if something could sway your mind at the very last second. And so I typically wait to the very end. But for Leah, who is more conservative of nature, it just did not work out for her.
Yeah. No, I do the same. I usually wait until day of, and I'll hand it in, a handful of hours before. Just same reason, just to make sure that I try to get as much and I felt woefully uninformed on this one, to be honest. My ballot only had I think 3.
You probably had the port commissioner.
I had the port in a school district, and then the long-term care thing.
Yeah, well, and that's interesting too, right? That specific race with the school district, because I think it was Lisa Leone and Cameron McGee.
Yep.
We know who Cameron McGee is.
Correct.
But nobody knew who Lisa Leone is.
Right.
And she actually works for the county. She works with juvenile, and it took me a minute to realize, but neither of them campaigned at all.
Yeah, I got my ballot, and I was like, who are these people? And again, I'm as engaged of a regular person as there probably is, and I didn't know almost anybody.
Yeah.
And I had to, go start asking around. So that's kind of one thing we're hoping to, as we get this thing going, I would love to have some more of these long form conversations with literally everybody on a ballot.
Right.
So people can get to know who they're actually voting for and what the differences are. And it's not like, something we talk about all the time is, kind of that clarity over agreement. Like I really would like people to come in and, I'm not going to agree with everything, but I'm not also, it's not about a debate necessarily. Like I want people's positions to be clarified.
Absolutely.
And so if their ideas are good, everybody out there is smart enough to know that, and if they have terrible ideas, then they'll figure that out too. But I would like for people to be able to come on and, have something where people, what was that, 77,000 it's showing now? That's the breakdown. Yeah, almost 77,000 registered voters, and I'm and I don't know what the percentage of people who are registered versus how many, because I know a lot of people that I've talked to over probably the last 5 or 6 years that have never voted in their whole life. And we got them registered, and they started voting and started getting engaged. And I was like, man, if we could do that on a more, because, I'm not really, obviously I have my own opinions, and but it's not so much that I am trying to just get one side to vote over another. Obviously, there's sides that I would prefer to win. But if you can vote, you should vote. Because this is the world you live in,
Let's talk about the No Kings protests, right?
Yeah.
We're saying no kings, and then yet we have a really low record turnout for an election. Well, that shows that there is just the whole concept.
Sure.
Because if there was a king, there would be no votes, and yet now you're not even doing what you should be doing to say, well, we don't have a king, so I'm voting. And so people just leave it to the wayside. I would be interested if you would actually go to lewiscountywa.gov and then go to the and the elected go to the auditor, and then on the side you'll see the election.
The results?
Not the results,
okay.
but actually, if you go to the results, it'll show you that number is actually different
Right.
than what's actually on the Lewis County website. Because I think because when I looked at it, I think it was 54,000.
Yeah. So you mean to tell me the government
there's
is not fully up to speed?
But what'll be interesting is the two races that will probably have a hand recount will be the Sizemore versus Ray Chapman Wilson, and then Brian Watson versus the guy that he ran against, which Brian didn't do anything to run. I actually wrote him a letter to the editor and was like, Brian, you've got to do something because you're in trouble because your guy is going to every door in Napavine, which is a good thing, right? He's actually doing the work to campaign.
Yeah.
And Brian is a really good guy, not controversial at all. I'm a little controversial.
I've heard.
Yeah, but he's done a great job on the city council in Napavine, and he luckily was able to pull it out, and he was up by 3, up by 2, and then on the last day he was up by 15.
Yeah, so that's one thing that.
But I guess I was saying that because there will be a hand recount, and you'll see how. I mean, obviously, I don't think that there will be a sway one way or the other on the vote, but that's how accurate our auditor office is with the election.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's really interesting to see how many people, you do these national elections, and people pay so much attention to national elections, and they mean almost nothing to your life. Even president. I mean,
Well, I disagree with
well, not that, but
it has
I'm
a
saying,
big impact.
yeah, no, I'm not saying nothing at all,
right.
But the amount of attention that people pay to their local politics, which affects every single day of your life, and maybe even multiple parts of it. Who you elect as sheriff and who you elect as commissioners. And so, and I think one of the things that I've, and I'm looking at my own self, so I've historically had no idea how any of that stuff works, what they even do. And so, that's one of the things we're hoping to do here is help people understand, well, what is a commissioner? Mm-hmm. Because you kind of, the sense that I get when I talk to people is they kind of think that the commissioner is like the president of Lewis County,
It actually is the executive branch of Lewis County.
So one of the things I wanted to talk with you about is what is a commissioner, and what are they supposed to do? Like what is their responsibilities? And I know a lot of times people get elected, and then they do all these things that maybe don't even have anything to do with their actual job or responsibilities. And so just from your perspective, what is a commissioner? How should we be looking at commissioners when we vote for them? And what kind of things do they actually impact in our daily life?
Well, I think the big one is fiscally responsibility and just making sure that they're living within their means, because they're the ones that set the budgets and approve the budgets for all the other electeds in different departments within the county. So I think in Lewis County we have over 600 employees, which represent different departments: public works, public health, community development. I mean, so there's just a gambit of different things. But then you also work with the courts, you work with the jail, you work with the sheriff's department, you work with the prosecuting attorneys, indigent defense. I mean, so just everything. And so you have to really begin to balance out what are the priorities for the county. And so a lot of times, I know for me, one of my 2 top priorities is law enforcement and then our roads, our infrastructure. We have to have great infrastructure, because if we don't have good infrastructure, we're not going to get good private industry to come into our area, and it's going to be hard for people to even develop from a housing, which you would know.
Very aware of all that stuff, yeah, for sure.
And so, but then also the big thing is we need public safety, and we need that not just with fire and EMS, but we need to make sure that we have law enforcement that's going to be able to cover the entire county. Now imagine this, right now in Lewis County, we have 4 deputies that is working across Lewis County. 4 deputies in the sheriff's department that goes all the way from Packwood to PL.
And just for, this is something I learned since I've been back, actually, that Lewis County is about the size of Delaware. Is that right?
Yeah, we're
It's
big.
so just for some perspective, our county is, as far as land, as big as a state in our country.
Yeah.
And so we've got this massive amount of space, but we also obviously
I
have
almost want to say we're bigger than Rhode Island.
that might be, and maybe he can look that up for us. But I mean, all that to say, it's a big area, and we don't have a lot of population.
Right.
So it's this big space to take care of, pretty low population, which is why we all love it. It's beautiful. People can have their own space. There's plenty of space to be, but yeah, how difficult does that dynamic make it to run something like that? Because you've got like Long Island, for instance, there's more taxpayers per square inch. Tax revenue per square inch is insane.
Right.
Here we have barely any tax per square inch, and a lot of the land that we have is not taxable. It's timber, agriculture, or low tax.
Well, the timber is actually fallen through the ground right now because of all the different thing that's coming out of Olympia, where they're restricting more and more ability to harvest timber, and they keep putting in different things to have buffers to where it makes it almost impossible for you to even harvest. So if you have timber that's close to a river, then you're not going to be able to harvest that. And so that makes it difficult. And so we really have to be, especially in my district, I feel like my district is more of the economic hub.
Yeah, like we're way bigger than Rhode Island. And I think
you could probably fit 2 Rhode Islands in there.
Yeah, and I think we're like the same size as Delaware, I think I heard. But yeah, I mean that's pretty crazy. And I know one of the big issues, obviously building in the area that we have, and historically we've had kind of a hands-off approach to a lot of things. There's been a lot of kicking the can down the road. So we've got really old infrastructure, and so as we're growing, and we've had really low taxes, and I know not everybody feels that way, but I've lived other places where the taxes actually are high,
right?
And we still have not brought the tax burden up to the place where it would actually need, and nobody's fixed these things in the past because they didn't want to raise taxes, or they didn't want to do those things politically that maybe have been not popular to do, but would have needed to be done so that we have good sewer, water infrastructure, good stormwater. I mean, stormwater is a big one around here. Right. Obviously, being in a valley, being in floodplains everywhere, the kind of soil we have, like floods are just a thing. And yeah, so not being able to deal with that stuff. And now we've got, just from my perspective, I've seen we've gotten a lot of good leaders in a lot of areas. Actually, this is it's been nice to see people step into these roles that could do other things and make more money at them. And so it's nice to see kind of a return to public service the way that it was kind of at the founding, where you just had people who were qualified, who cared about their country, and they spent a portion of their life saying, I'm going to take my turn and I'm going to give to this community, and everybody's going to give me crap about it, and they're going to hate everything I do, but I'm going to try to leave it better than I found it, and then I got somebody else needs to take over because I still got to provide for my family and do the things that I could do. So it's been nice to see people step into these roles, but they've kind of been left a flaming bag of crap, on the front porch from like, and I'm talking like even 30, 40, 50 years ago, just stuff that probably needed to be done at the time that just never happened. And I don't know how much of that you guys are fighting, but I hear stuff and from people out in the public, and I don't think they realize how much of that went on, where we were just always doing the bare minimum or not even, and now we're having to kind of come up to compliance.
Catch up, yeah.
And it's a bear.
Well, and I huge credit to our community development person, Mindy Brooks, in what she's doing.
I really like Mindy.
Yeah, and just how she's, even with our comprehensive plan and making sure that our urban centers are going to be developed, and unurban areas are the remote areas of Lewis County are going to stay remote, and we're not going to have urban sprawl.
Yeah.
And we're going to make sure that the cities are the ones that's doing all the urban pieces, and so your higher density housing will be in those areas. But that's also where we want our private sector to really grow, and that's why we have port areas. And so that's yes, so she's doing a great job really bringing that up to speed. And something you'll be happy to hear is here in about 3 weeks we'll be paperless on our permitting, and you'll have a forward-facing software to where you can see where you're at in the permit process, and so it'll help to manage our users' expectation and to provide better customer service. So really looking forward to that, because if
it's a big deal.
If I get a phone call,
yeah,
I'm going to say probably like 1 out of 5, it has to do with something regarding permitting or where I'm at in the process.
Yeah, no, they've definitely come a long ways, and
you were right.
There it is, 58,000.
Yep.
And we almost made 35%.
Yeah.
So I mean, just think about how crazy that is. That voter turnout is 35%, and we're talking about. I mean, you're talking about elections that are swinging on 12 votes or 6 votes or whatever. One of the things we really want people to understand is, and obviously for myself, I want to learn these things to a much deeper degree, that, what all these positions are, what they all do, actually get some real information on these candidates, because they do, you vote for somebody for your school board and you have kids, that's a huge impact on your life.
Absolutely.
You vote for somebody at the port, and people are like, I don't even know what a port is. I don't even know what they do over there. That would be most people. And that has a huge impact on your life.
It absolutely does.
Yeah.
Tell me what a port is. Just in general, when you think of port, what is the intention of a port? So if you just go all the way up to Seattle or to Tacoma, what is a port? What's coming in on the port?
Yeah, typically you just got goods coming in there.
Distribution of goods.
Yeah, commerce is happening there. But that's not how we're doing it.
Well, no, actually, that is the port. That is exactly what it is. That's what's in the port land, the port area of Centralia. Is typically it's going to be distribution. That's what they're intended to do. That's why you have a port, is for the distribution of goods. And so people are saying, well, we need technology in there. We need a technology hub, or we need manufacturing in there. That's not what the intention of a port was.
Yeah.
And that's still not what it is. It is to distribute goods. And so, I know we're going on a tangent now.
Yeah, no, this is good though.
But the city of Centralia, and this is where I'm a little frustrated with the city of Centralia and the city council, is because they tilted the port race, because they put that moratorium in place, which, I'm not sure when this is going to go out, but that moratorium does not affect the UGA. It's not in effect.
Correct. Yeah. No, I know that. Yeah.
Well,
but that's not what
most people think, that the moratorium is being imposed on the port, and it's not. And so, and hopefully that will come out soon. We're trying to do things in a diplomatic way that we can get all three of us at the table to come up with a positive conclusion to making sure that we're all working together cohesively, and we're not just trying to do our own thing. And so that's where we've been pretty soft with our language on this whole moratorium piece. But what the city of Centralia did is, during the process of an election, they put the moratorium so everyone thinks that the port, and they go straight to the port. That all of a sudden that the port is doing things that might be shady, and we have to stop everything and reassess what they're doing. And so obviously we need some change in the port. And so they really, I think it's okay when an elected endorses a person or helps them run, but when a government does things that tips the scales, I think that is incredibly wrong. And I even had a chat with the mayor before I said, don't do this because you're going to swing the race. And sure enough, they still moved it forward, but then at the last minute, they used this emergency declaration that they got rid of public engagement to be able to have people voice their concerns. And so instead of having 2 readings, they went to 1 reading, and there was no emergency.
Right.
There's nothing in the pipeline other than what's already there. And now they've actually stalled out the project that's already there. They got all this concrete poured,
Yeah.
and they're not giving them, they gave them half of the permit. What does that even mean? Half of a permit. You still can't build without, unless you have the full permit to build.
Yeah.
A developer, and even when it comes to the developer's agreement, they're playing, a developer's agreement usually means that I'm not going to do everything right now, but you can expect that A, B, C, D, E, F, G is going to take place, and we're going to do it, and we're going to sign on the line, and this is our guarantee that we are going to take care of all these things. And it's a legally binding contract, but now they're saying they're not going to do a developer's agreement because they want A, B, C, D, E, F all done, and then you can do, a couple other things down the road.
Right.
Which is wrong, and they implied these things. And so, even when the mayor got on her own Facebook account and said, and she misled the public that that the port was not interested in mediation, which is absolutely not true. From when I've talked to both the port director and Julie Shafley, who is the commissioner, and Kyle Markstrom and Peter Lamont, they all want to do mediation. They all want to work together, and they want to do things that are going to be in the best interest of Centralia and Lewis County. So that was a huge frustration, and I think it's going to have some really serious negative consequences. And you're talking, and they even implied that they did the moratorium to stop this specific developer. This specific developer is looking to pour $1 billion into our economy through these different buildings, and they have some Fortune 500 companies that want to come into the area, and they are playing. I mean, this is, in my opinion, it's weaponizing the government. It's absurd, and this is not what government was intended to do. The government is for the people, and it's to work for the people, not against the people. And if, what is it, the potential new governor, or actually the new governor of New York, his whole thing is there's
mayor of New York City. Yes. So yeah,
his thing is there's nothing too big that government can't solve, and there's nothing too small. Well, if you're relying on government to take care of everything, put a crown on that person's head.
Right.
Because that's not what government was intended. Like, they are not here to solve. They're here to be an asset, to work for you, to get problems solved, to help you out, but not to dictate what's going to be done. And if a market is bearing certain different economy pieces to go into an area, the government doesn't have a right to say, nope, that's not right for us, that's not right. If it's zoned and someone purchases it, a private industry purchases it, well, they should have every right to put their industry there. I mean, I don't like porn shops.
Right.
But if it's zoned,
right,
I don't, as a government official, I don't get to stop it.
Yeah.
I don't like marijuana shops.
Yeah.
But if it's zoned for it and it's legal for it to be there, and a person buys it and it's a private industry,
right,
and they jump through all the hoops, well, guess what? They get to have it. And I don't get to change the rules at the last minute because I don't like something. And that's what we're seeing with the city of Centralia and what they're trying to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I think that's a good point that, if we want to change some of the dynamics of our community, I think you want to do that through zoning, through pre-planning. And I think that's a criticism of just the area in general, that we don't do a lot of forward thinking. We're very reactionary historically. So, and I was going to ask you this, as far as what you were just talking about, how much of this do you think just kind of goes back to there's kind of these two factions that are always warring around here of the people who don't want one single more person to live here, and then the people who understand that, you are either growing or you're dying. I mean, there's a, Big Tom Callahan once said, rest in peace, Big Tom. You're either growing or you're dying. There ain't no third direction. And I think that's...
Is that a Tommy Boy reference?
Yeah. So, greatest movie ever filmed.
It is. Man, every time you watch it, you're going to laugh. There's no question.
Yeah, I've watched that movie so many times. So, but I think it's true, as a person, in your life, you're either growing or you're dying. There is no such thing as neutral or static. And so that's whether you're an organism, whether you're an organization, whether you're a municipality, whether you're a city, in your spiritual life, in your, whatever it is, if you're not growing, you are regressing.
Right. And,
we've obviously at the Planning Commission done a lot of work with Packwood. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting to see kind of the peaks and valleys of Packwood historically. They were kind of a booming town at one point.
And it was timber.
Yep, and it was timber. And they had the mill. And, so that goes away. They decide that they don't want it to grow in population at all. And they almost go extinct as a town. I mean, you get down into like the hundreds of people, like a couple hundred.
Right.
And then now, and going back to Mindy and some of the work that they're trying to do at this point is having directed growth, which is kind of always my pitch to everybody. It's like, look, I get everybody moves here because they like to not live right next to somebody. But the fact is that, like you're saying, you have private property rules and you have zoning, and if something's legal to build, people should be able to build it. Whether you like it or not is kind of irrelevant.
Can you imagine me putting a moratorium on housing?
Well, yeah.
We're just not going to build any more housing.
But you know how many people I talk to that would consider themselves very libertarian or very conservative that also want to impose their view of, of not wanting to have anybody next to them and actually limit or totally abolish people's property rights in the pursuit of it. And I'm like, you sound like a communist.
Right.
What are you talking about? And then you tell them that, and they're like, well, that's not really what I mean. It's like, but it is. It is what you mean. And it's because, so there's I heard this from somebody, and I think it's true the longer I look at it, that people think that Lewis County is like very Republican. And I'm not sure that that's true. I think it's very libertarian at its core. There's a lot, and I don't even think they know this, but I think the overarching theme that most people have around here, and I kind of noticed it myself once I heard it, was that everybody just wants to be left alone, sort of. Like that's kind of their primary goal, is to just be, nobody tell me what to do, and everybody stay away from me.
Do you think it's more libertarian or more conservative? Just more of a conservative mindset?
I do think it's more libertarian the more that I look at it, because we have a lot of people who are maybe tend to be more fiscally conservative, but people are actually very socially liberal at the same time, more so than you would think as I kind of go out. And so, but I do think it kind of boils down to a kind of a unique thing that people just want to be left alone and not told what to do, and having this kind of theology of I just don't want anybody telling me what to do sort of puts you at the top and says, well, I can still tell everybody else what to do, but nobody can tell me what to do. So I do see a lot of that where you get things that are kind of cognitively dissident in a lot of the folks we talk to that are, they have these ideas that seem kind of diametrically opposed to one another, but if you kind of strip it down to the base, it's kind of this idea of, I'm the king of my own castle. This is my land. I can do literally anything I want. Nobody should be able to tell me what... Like, you're laughing because you've heard this a million times, man. Right?
Yeah.
And so people are like, I should be able to do literally anything I want. But then their neighbor tries that, and it's like all hell breaks loose, and they're like, there's rules, man, you can't do that. And so we have a lot of that going on. So I just am curious if you see this also politically kind of playing out, where a lot of things aren't coming from an overarching foundational belief system. It's a lot of like, we just don't want anybody here, and we just make up these rules on the fly to keep people out. And then there's the group of people that say, we're either, we're all having kids, this area is growing, people like it, they're coming here for a certain reason, we need to have jobs, we need to have places to live. Right. Yeah, I mean, yeah, you're not gonna it's amazing that it hasn't grown more than it has over the history of its life. And even, going back to Brian's book, one of the things I found so interesting in there is that, even back in the late 1800s, they were thinking this was going to be, within 10 years, 100,000 people. One of the biggest places in the state. It actually came down to a vote for the state capital between Centralia and Olympia. That's how much momentum Centralia had at the time. And so it's really interesting to think that there was that vision at the beginning when George Washington was setting this up, and he's trying to grow this place, and he's like, I want a decent place where people are having families, and there's good homes to live in, and there's churches, and there's good community, and there's jobs, and we're right on the railway, and this kind of vision that he had. And then we kind of at some point rejected that, and the town went down to I don't know, 10,000 people when I was born, probably. I don't know what the population was in 1979, but it was not very big.
Well, it did grow, and it went through another recession.
Yeah, it's gone through a couple iterations, yeah.
The TransAlta site, right?
Yeah.
And so that was a major economy, and so when that shut down, then you had a mass exodus again, and that's where you see really kind of a depression era that lasted, I don't know, for 10 years, from 2003 to 2013, and then going through the bubble pop with the housing market back in 2008, which actually added another layer of hardship to the area. And so, I definitely agree. And, to your question, I think I can summarize it in this: people don't like change unless they're the ones doing the changing. And here's a great example. So Borst Avenue. And so new sidewalks, and a person that was a part of getting that, all for it. I mean, it's beautiful, the lights, I don't know, is it 10-foot sidewalks? I mean, it's pretty big.
Yeah.
Now there is construction on a different road, and the same thing is taking place, and this person is being impacted by this new construction sidewalk, and the person was, this was something that they really spearheaded and got this done, and now it's in front of their house.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden there's just going to be a whole lot more traffic now, and I'm not real happy about it coming, because now the change is impacting them.
Yeah.
And I think that's where people they want to be left alone, and they don't want someone else's change to impact their life. And if you think about it, when the city of Centralia just had their hearing for the moratorium, who came out and spoke against spoke in favor of the moratorium? We need to keep it longer. Can you tell me what people? Probably.
I mean, I'm sure I could guess. I've been to enough of these things. I kind of have a sense, but yeah.
It's the people that are being impacted by the port. They live next to the port, and they don't like it.
Well, and sometimes, isn't it people who think they're going to be impacted? I mean, I see a lot of that, working in the planning commission and going to some of the meetings. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of times where people come out just upset, and I have, limited understanding of how some of this stuff works. I'm involved enough to kind of know some of it, and I'm listening to them talk, and I'm thinking, I don't know who told you that, but literally none of that is true. And they're really upset about it because they think they're going to be impacted, and they're actually not going to be, but they don't know it. And so, how often are you seeing that kind of stuff when, you guys have these public meetings and people come and testify and, do their public comments? It's like they're talking about things that actually don't have anything to do with anything.
Right. It's a lot of times. Well, I shouldn't say a lot of times.
It's not. Yeah.
A quarter of the time, it's off topic and a conspiracy theory that's just not true.
Right.
And just even to you were at a meeting recently that I was a part of, and there was a guy that was complaining about some of the developments that you've been a part of, and you're standing there right next to me, and I thought you did such a great job just taking it head on and talking to him and really diffuse the situation. And I think information is power, and whenever you can help to bring clarity to something that is muddy, I think people more times than not are reasonable enough to give concession and compromise and be okay.
Yeah, no, I actually really enjoyed that conversation. I really appreciated, because we actually talked for probably another half hour outside. And even though we couldn't have disagreed more on kind of the, this is something I see a lot. A lot of people are on the same page as far as the diagnosis, but they're not on the same page as far as the prescription.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of where we were differing, obviously. And for obvious reasons, we just operate in different spheres of the world. I understood why he thought what he thought. And I think as he allowed me to kind of clarify what we're doing. And so it was a really great conversation. I really appreciated that he took the time, because we're on total opposite sides of this thing. But I think through the conversation, we realized that we agree on most of the stuff. We just don't agree on what the best course would be to take care of that, or what the unintended consequences of certain things would be. And so we talked through a lot of that stuff. It was a really great conversation, I thought. I don't know if either of us changed our minds at all, but it was nice. It's kind of like what I hope to see a lot more, just in general, just in the country. People going, we don't have to agree on everything. That's okay, and just being able to talk stuff up. But yeah, it was definitely one of those clarity over agreement things, and it was cool. So, yeah, so. One of the things that I also wanted to get into is a lot of the homeless things that are going on. I know that's something that, man, I feel like there's not a day that goes by that people aren't asking me about this or talking to me about this. And so one of the things that I have, and I'll just kind of preface this with my thoughts real quick. But
I saw a comment on Facebook that someone closely connected to you about going to the library and not being able to take their daughter to the library.
So no, it's man, there's so much to get into, right. and I'll try to keep it focused, because we could talk about these things. There's so many tentacles that come off that octopus. So so when I was little, my dad worked like a job during the day, and he had a cleaning business at night, and the library was one of the buildings that we cleaned. So, and most of my life, some of my earliest memories are just working, like with my dad, like cleaning toilets, vacuuming, emptying garbage cans, just stuff that a kid can do, right? And, and he didn't have any options at that time. It was like, I just got to work 2 jobs, and I don't have anybody that can watch my kids, so I just worked with him. And I have a lot of memories being there. And so it was crazy to move back, because I was gone for a while, and to see what has happened there. And there's so many thoughts going through my head right now on different things. But let's just back that up a little bit and go, so I think one of the things that as I look at how we're dealing with it as a community, I think there's kind of questions you got to ask yourself as a community. And one of the things that I think about is you either take this group of people who's being funneled here through program. Because people go where the opportunities are. That's just universal. So we have it set up, like it or don't like it. where there is a lot of services available to those folks. And so at that point, once you've made that decision, which we have, you can either decide, do we eliminate those services and redirect those folks to another place, because they obviously won't stick around if there's nothing there for you. Right. I mean, everybody does that. If there's no jobs, you leave. You go somewhere where there's no jobs. If you can't afford where you live, you go somewhere else. So it's the same with any group of people. Or we decide, okay, the buck stops with us. We are going to make a concerted and strategic effort to help these folks. Because I think if you're going to have yourself set up where you've incentivized people to be someplace, you either have to decide we're not going to do that anymore, or you're going to decide, okay, we're going to take on this responsibility. And it seems like, just from my perspective, our community as a whole and leadership as a whole has kind of struggled with
the process,
that idea. Like,
direction.
are we gonna just take responsibility for this group of people and say, let's actually be the place, if they're here, let's be a place where we have a real strategic, well thought out, opportunity for recovery, reintegration, all those kinds of things, and do it in a way where it's good for the people who are struggling, and it's good for the people who live here, and it works out for everybody. And it's just been this very kind of like throw money at it, no real plan, no real infrastructure. A lot of people aren't getting helped, and so kind of talk me through a little bit. And also another thing that I've talked a lot to people about is that kind of the typical conservative approach, if you're going to stereotype it, is, well, we'll help you, once you get your act together. Like, you get sober, historically, I'm not talking about like in the immediate, has been kind of like, you get sober, you get willing, and we'll put some money behind you. And for people who are in that position, that's a bridge, that's pretty far to travel. Like, it, that's a big step. And then the typical, like, stereotypical kind of liberal point of view is like, you do whatever you want, like, we'll give you whatever you tell me you need. And it's like kind of this, the Christian term is like sloppy agape. It's just like, we're going to love you to the point where it's like detrimental to you. Like, right. We're offering you no structure, no help, like no standards at all. And so as I've looked into this issue quite a bit over the years, the places that seem to have the most success have something in the middle of that, where there are kind of stages that you can enter into. And so it's like, we'll take anybody. You don't have to be sober, but you get kind of very limited services. Now, if you want better living circumstances or you want more services, here's what you need to do, and then we're all in on that. And they kind of help move people down the road one stage at a time. That seems to be kind of the common thread. And so talk to me a little bit about, in your view, kind of where all this was at when you kind of got in and got involved, and what direction we're heading now, because I know there's some things in the works, and kind of why it has to flow in that way. Because I think a lot of people are confused about what the direction is and why it needs to happen that way, and what your guys' constraints are as commissioners trying to figure this thing out for everybody.
So this process obviously was something that wasn't on my radar when I became a commissioner. And then as get into 3 months down the road, and you start passing all these contracts where you have millions of dollars going into the homeless population, and you start seeing, okay, we're spending X amount of dollars and it doesn't feel like anything's getting better. And so year 2 rolls around and all the contracts come back up, and they're doing increases to the amount of money to the different organizations. And I was like, man, okay, I need to take more time and read the 80-page contract to be able to get the funding. And so, I would probably say 90% of the contract is just boilerplate template noise. But then you get into, what is required and what you can and can't do with the money. And that's where the real frustration and the rub really begins to set off, because you can't hold anyone accountable when you get this money from Commerce. And so recently I challenged, because they wanted to give us another $2 million with the CHG, which is a contract to where it's just for homeless services. And I said, no, I don't want the extra. Just give me what we had last year, and we're just going to roll with that, because our numbers, our point in time count that we did had actually dropped by 15%. So I was, why are you giving me more money if my numbers are getting better? Give that money to someone that their numbers are going the wrong direction. I don't need it. What you're doing is you're incentivizing for us to have all this money to pour more money into the homeless situation. And what does that do? That attracts more people. And you hear people talking about how, you probably see it, your wife probably sees it, people you talk to, people that we've never seen before just automatically begin to show up, and they get into services. And then we have a free bus service that comes from Olympia down to here. And so all of a sudden I have bus drivers talking to me that, they come down here and they stay for 3 or 4 weeks. And then when it's time for them to go get some type of service up in Olympia, they double dip and they go up there and they get it. And so they've really gamed the system. So after the first year, and I started looking at the contracts, I pulled every contract and I started to scrutinize. Now there was one organization that we were giving $2.5 million to do. I think there was 3 different services. And so I asked them, hey, I want to talk to you about the contracts, because we want to build more accountability we want accountability for the people that you're serving. We want accountability from you, and we need to be accountable to the taxpayers. This is taxpayer money. This isn't charity.
Right.
We have to have results. We can't continue going down this road to where Joe, who was homeless last year, isn't any better today, and we've spent, $10,000 on Joe. That makes no sense. Well, as soon as I had that conversation, they canceled all their contracts. $2.4 million gone. I was like, fine, we'll find new people.
Yeah.
And then the other piece of it is in order to really hold people accountable, there was one thing that we needed that we didn't have, which was a night-by-night shelter that was year-round. Not cold weather, because of the Blake's decision, where you have to make sure that you have somewhere for a person to go. So let's say if someone's staying in Washington Park sleeping, law enforcement can't go approach those people and say, hey, you got to get out of here. They at that point in time, it's not the Blake's decision, it's the Idaho decision, the Boise decision.
Yeah.
But they have to have the shelter. And so I was, okay, we're going to have a year-round night-by-night shelter. It's now open. Salvation Army's doing the shelter. And over the course of time, there are organizations that we just kept pouring money into, and that's why I've decided, okay, well, we're going to switch things up. And so we just recently are coordinated entry, which people get on the list and they help to facilitate the different resources that they need to get. Well, we're RFPing that because we need a new organization. Salvation Army was doing it, but now they're focused on doing the shelter. And so my hope is I've done my homework and sought out different organizations that are crushing it, and they use this pathway software. So if you don't get housing, which only 25% do, they call it the golden ticket, what happens to the 75%? We just keep funneling money and at some point their housing will become available, but we'll just you can be homeless and we're not going to do anything. No, let's meet them where they're at.
Yeah.
So is it a job? Is it a driver's license? Do you need drug treatment? Do you need mental health treatment? What is it? Let us help you get that. And so hopefully the new organization that will be doing coordinated entry is going to do exactly that, and to help make sure that Joe is not on coordinated entry next year because he's now got a job, he's off drugs, and he is an active member of our community, and is, maybe he's reconnected to his family, whatever it is.
Right. Yeah.
But we're going to have success to where we can start putting the proverbial faces on a board, and we can start pulling them off as they get better. And so that is an absolute focus of mine, because I don't want to continue the problem. And that was the thing with Blakesley Junction. You would be shocked and appalled at the approach from service providers on what to do, what they were doing.
Yeah.
They would drive up there and they would take all the stuff in. So food, clothing, needles, everything that they need to survive and not ever leave Blakesley Junction.
Right.
That is not helping anyone, because then we started having people overdose on drugs. Well, you wonder why.
Yeah.
It's because you're keeping them in that cesspool and not really helping them.
It's the illusion of compassion.
Oh, it's not. I wouldn't even call it compassion, because.
Well, but it's the kind of thing that you can go to a party and go, we do all this stuff for this group of people.
Right.
But it's not actually bettering their situation. You're not actually loving those people by leaving. Like, you don't do that with your kids. Like, if your kid is doing something that's going to be detrimental to their life down the road, or you don't do this with your friends, not if you're a good family member or a good friend. Right. Like, you say something, you go, hey man, like, you're drinking too much, like, it's going to ruin your life, or hey, you're doing this thing, like, it's going to ruin your marriage, or your kids are going to hate you if you keep acting like this. If you're a real friend, you do that for people. Or if you're a good parent, you go, hey, I don't think it's a good idea for you to play on I-5. That will hurt you. But the equivalent that we end up doing with a lot of these folks is we go, yeah, if you want to play on I-5, do it. We'll take you there. We'll drop you off in the middle, and have fun, and you just let us know when you need the next thing. And it's like, that's not loving. It's just the illusion, like, it's a talking point of caring about somebody. But the real work of caring for people is a lot dirtier, more unpredictable. It takes a long time. You got to know the people. I've got a guy that I've been trying to get on, and he's been doing this work for a long time. And we've talked pretty extensively, and I'd love to get him on here, about just what that work actually looks like and what it actually takes to help somebody. And it's, you can't break it down in a linear because it's people. Right. And people have different desires, different levels of, whatever they're dealing with, their own circumstances. And that's why the government, in my opinion, is so ineffective at it, because the government is very process oriented. It's a huge problem. And that I've got some other opinions on just benevolence in general, like where that works best and where it comes from best. But that's always been a challenge for the government to implement.
Well, I don't think the government should be leading that charge. I think it's got to be the private sector. It's got to be the churches.
Yeah.
It's got to be people that are giving their donations to be able to help, and that's where you live within your means, instead of taxpayer money being used at $1 billion, $2 billion a clip year over year for the state, and it's only getting worse and compounding. I just think it's a terrible way to go, and a terrible process the way that we've done it. And the state, especially in our state, they've removed all accountability. You cannot have success without accountability.
100%, yeah.
And so I remember even talking about accountability, and I had a person that was working in this field of social services saying, well, that's an aggressive word. Don't use that word. I said, accountability?
Yeah.
It was like, yeah, it's just, there's so much stigmatism behind the word accountability, and people are having just a really tough time. And I said, so what you're telling me, just as a father, I can't hold my kids accountable, that if they go and they keep eating the butter And I told them, no, just eventually they're going to stop, and don't hold them accountable. I said, that doesn't even begin to make sense. And when you're using my money and the citizens' money that we're being taxed, we have to have accountability. And until we get back to that place to where there is accountability, in which I'm hoping with the new groups that we're trying to work with, that is something at the very forefront of their mind, that there has to be accountability. Because one of our most successful rehabilitation type services that we have is drug court. And that it's successful because they're held accountable. We're not going to let you just stay in jail. You can come out, but you're going to have to get a drug test. Mm-hmm. You're going to have to get a job. You're going to have to detox. And if you make mistakes, we're not going to kick you out. But maybe you have to write an essay on why that decision wasn't best. If you don't go to your appointments, well, then there will be penalties along the way. And if you use, well, we're going to put you back in jail, and then we'll talk about whether or not this is the right fit for you. And they'll give them, as long as they're showing that they want to win, they will give them grace, but they're going to hold them accountable. That even though I did drugs doesn't mean that I'm just going to get a slap on the wrist. No, you're going to go in jail, and you're going to spend the weekend, and then we'll talk about it after, and we'll figure out the path forward. But there's always drug tests, there's mental health treatment, you have to get your driver's license, there's so many facets that drug court to get people back up and moving forward, that if we could reproduce this in the private sector with these social services, and not be this, well, I just want to do whatever feels good, and just really be rigid and hold people accountable. When you raise the bar, people rise to the bar. When you lower the bar, they just lower themselves and the expectations as well.
Yeah, and that is, I think, a really good point. I think one of the things that we kind of fundamentally misunderstand is human nature, especially in governance right now, just kind of broadly speaking. This idea that people are ultimately good, and that if they're not good, it's because something that society or the government or somebody has done to them to make them that way. And obviously, the Christian idea and the historical idea has been like, no, people are awful, and the only thing that makes them good is, relationship with God, where they're transforming into somebody that's more like God on a consistent basis. So I think at its core, you can kind of go back down to all these philosophies, and they kind of manifest in different ways, but it kind of goes down to that one issue. It's like, how do you think people will behave at their most core level? And if you know that we will always do the minimum if given the option. I was just talking to somebody about this on the way over. It was like, we were talking about this is something I've been thinking a lot about, actually, just the problems that come along with prosperity. People think that prosperity just is a blanket problem solver, and it just washes away all issues, but it comes with its own separate set of problems. And one of those issues is that, even for those of us that want to be, more grateful or less entitled, or all those things that you work really hard at those things, it's impossible to not have it affect you some. Like there are people in other countries, and I've been fortunate enough to be in a lot of other countries where, they don't even, it doesn't even occur to them some of the things that we're like, I was talking to somebody about the Nigerian church, and these pictures of people, whoever's still left in this town, the next day showing up in a building that used to be a church, and they're having a worship service in like the middle of rubble. And then, at our church, or any church in America, people come in and they're like, I don't like the coffee in the lobby.
The music's way too loud today.
This is too, this is, the music's not to my liking. So it's like, but even if you're not to that extreme, there's just, it's hard to not be impacted by it. And so, we kind of move as we lose touch with what it means to be a human, and we accept that we are not good as, like, we don't come out good. I mean, that's one of the fundamental ideas of biblical Christianity is, like, you are born a sinner, right? Like, you are going to tend to do the things you don't want to do.
Just as Paul said.
Right. So, and I think everybody knows this. Everybody knows that no matter what your standards are, you typically fall short of them. So even if somebody's got a totally different set of standards from me, they still don't live up to their own standards for their life sometimes. And I think that just shows us. So when we try to take a philosophy that says people are ultimately good and they only have become not good because of something done, put upon them, we're not approaching the problem with the right mentality.
Right.
And instead of, what you're talking about is that, any of us, if I want to eat better, like, I need somebody to tell me, dude, what are you eating right now? I mean, because that's one thing, like, I'm like one of those guys that, like, I'm not like a big foodie. Mm-hmm. I like food as fuel most of the time, and I'm just, like, doing stuff all day, and I just, like, and I don't even think about eating. I'm so undisciplined in this. This is one of those things I've always been trying to work on. It's like I'm going, and then all of a sudden I go, I'm starving. And then I just eat whatever's close to me, and I don't even think about it.
You binge eat.
Well, no, it's just like, it's total convenience. So it's like not anything in particular. Like,
it's whatever is on the corner.
It's like I have become hungry all of a sudden, hungry enough that I notice, and there's food there, and I'm going to eat it so I stop feeling hungry, and I can just get back to what I'm doing. And so, like, I have to have people around me that are like, dude, you need to eat. You gotta stop doing that. Like, you gotta prepare, like, you gotta have a standard. And I appreciate that so much. Or if I need to get in shape, it's like, where do you find the time with all the stuff? And you just got to make certain things a priority. But yeah, I think you're exactly right. People do, and this is one of the things that somebody told me about raising kids that I've always thought about and I really appreciated, was that, your kids will tend to live up to the standards that you give them. And so, I mean, that's another thing. We've talked about it on the show several times, but Abigail Schreier's book, Bad Therapy, I don't know if you've read it.
I don't think I have.
Great book. Everybody should read it. I think it's really, really good for us to understand. But just the whole idea that, everything, we focus so much about how we feel about stuff and less about just what we need to do, whether we like it or not, whether we feel like doing it or not. And so when we have this, thing where parents are just going, well, I'm not going to tell you what to think, or I'm not going to tell you what to believe, or I'm not going to tell you what works, and you're just sending your kids out to figure the world out on their own and giving them...
And you just don't want to hurt their feelings, right?
Yeah, and it's like, I want to do is not hurt their feelings, and it's like those kids typically end up hating their parents, like, because kids freak out without boundaries. Like, they are... if you've ever had a kid or been around a kid, like, they're constantly looking for the edges.
Yeah.
And so they feel safe when you go, don't go here, don't do this. These are the safe areas to be in. And they actually respond much better. It's not, when I was more active in doing finance, like, that was one of the things I talked with people about with budgets. It was like, a budget, we always think about being a restrictive thing. Like, you can't spend money on these things. But actually, if you do a budget correctly, it allows you to spend as much money as you want on the things that are important to you, because you've guided the money to that spot. So it should be a liberating thing for your finances. And it's the same with our lives. Like, me saying, like, well, there's certain things I just can't eat anymore at my age and because I feel like crap. Well, it's not restrictive to say I shouldn't eat as much sugar. I shouldn't, mostly I just drink a lot of coffee with sugar in it and stuff. It's like, well, that's not restrictive because it's making me feel better. Like, I feel better the rest of the day. That's actually a freeing thing.
Right.
And so it's kind of a societal thing, I think, that permeates all the way down into kind of the discussion we're having. And as you approach the people that are, they're going through real stuff. And there's all kinds of reasons why they're going through it. And some of them are more or less motivated to change that. But they're going through things that have become outside of their ability to deal with it at this point in time. And if you really want to help somebody, you got to help them get to a spot that is good for them, not what they want in the moment.
It's the playground theory. Have you ever seen that experiment to where they set up a playground with no fences?
Okay.
And then they tell the kids to go play, and everyone stays close to an area.
Mm-hmm.
But the moment you put a chain link fence around the playground, then everyone disperses to all corners because you've set up the boundaries. Which is accountability, because now you're not going to go over the boundary, and there's expectations. Here's where you can operate. Here's what you can do, instead of staying all clumped together where potentially trouble begins to happen because there's too many things in one concentrated area. And that's where, and I just want to be very clear, and I've been accused of hating homeless people, that I just want to get rid of all the homeless people. You know what? Absolutely. I would love to solve that issue.
Right.
I know that I'm not going to solve that issue, but I do want to make sure that every dollar is being maximized to be able to help a person, not further entrench them in their demise. And so I don't see it as where just because I wanted to not have as much money, I want to live within our means. It's the same thing with our budgets. Like we have to, if I'm always increasing taxes, do you like that?
Right.
Nobody likes that.
Nobody likes it.
And so in the same sense, if the state is having issues with budgets or with revenue, why are you giving me more money for homeless services? Can we better utilize? Can we get better and more efficient at what we're doing? And that's where really getting service providers that really understand the success mechanism, and they have different components. So there's a software called Pathways, and every time you get a box done, they are reimbursed for getting that check off. So if it's getting someone a license, then I have someone that's working, a social worker that's working with a person and helping them along the way. And so they're succeeding, and they don't get paid unless they help them through that situation, which is accountability for both sides. I think that is phenomenal, and we need more of
carrots.
That. Yeah. What I don't want to see is someone slouching over on the sidewalk because they're drugged out of their mind. I don't want to see that. I don't want to see that for anyone.
Yeah.
And so, and I know that our community, it also makes our community less safe, because you never know. And I remember when I really thought, okay, I really need to tackle this, my wife went to a grocery store with our kids, and while she's walking in there, a person walks up and just starts yelling right in front of her face. It wasn't a dangerous person. It was a person that was just drugged out.
Yeah.
But it scared all my kids.
Yeah.
And so anytime we get, for a while, if there was someone that kind of remotely looked like that person, Dad, lock the door.
Yeah.
It scared them.
Yeah.
And so I want to have compassion for those people, but I also want to have compassion for our citizens as well, and that making sure that when a person wants to go to the library, they should feel safe to take their 5-year-old daughter to the library to get a book. They shouldn't feel or worry if something dangerous is going to happen. You're going to the library. And so we need good policies. We need good organizations that are going to be held accountable and are going to hold people accountable, and that whenever we use someone else's money, that we're using it in the most effective way because it's producing good results. And right now, I think we're getting better in Lewis County. Across the state, we're not getting better. Our homeless numbers continually climb. Our overdose rates are skyrocketing still. And that's just where we need a philosophy change.
Yeah.
We need accountability.
Yeah. No, 100%. And it's, you don't love somebody if you're willing to just leave them where they're at.
And
I mean,
watch them die.
just across the board. Yeah. And so, it's unfortunate that there's kind of a narrative out there that, giving somebody everything that they want is somehow loving to them. and it's a lot more complex than that. And I think like you're saying, the best way to get rid of the homeless people is to make them all not homeless. And
Right.
And it's not that you want to get rid of them as people, but you want to take
care
that
of the situation.
take care of the situation that's not good for anybody. It's not like that guy who was like, yelling in your family's face went like once he became sober again was like, man, I'm really glad I did that.
Right.
That was awesome. I feel
They probably
really
don't
good
even
about that.
remember it,
Yeah,
to be honest.
and I mean, I've been able to be involved in several like homeless ministries and things, and we've talked with people. I mean, I've talked to homeless people in Indianapolis. I've talked to homeless people in San Francisco. I've talked to homeless people in LA. I mean, I've been able to go into some of these places just over the years and actually talk with people who are in these situations currently, and the vast majority of the time during periods where they're like in their right mind and they're just, and it's interesting to hear people's stories and what it is that they want and what they out of their lives and what they think of their situation, but a lot of the people that are really critical of things that would actually help people get from one spot to another have not sat down and talked to people. They don't even understand how they got there, what their own view of it is. I mean, I just listened to an interview not that long ago where somebody was just totally convinced that almost all homeless people have become that way because they had a medical issue at some point that they couldn't pay for, went bankrupt, and then became homeless, and then started using drugs and became addicted to drugs after they were homeless. And so kind of the line of thinking was that, well, this is really a capitalism issue. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But they were a nice enough person. I think they genuinely believe it. I think it comes from a place where they think they're being compassionate and trying to understand it. But that has not been my experience with people that I've worked with or talked to. Not that I've done so much of this stuff. I just have had several instances where I've been able to do that. But yeah, it's not, and it's not what the numbers bear out. I mean, I've read some studies on it, but yeah, drug addiction, and then therefore, chicken egg. Sometimes it's before or after, but it's interpersonal relationships that go away. So sometimes it's before the drug use, sometimes it's because of the drug use. But those are the two items that are by far and away, by polling, what causes that situation. So people get isolated and they're on a substance that's mind altering and chemically addictive, and and they get stuck.
They definitely get stuck, and that's, I mean, just my experience here in Lewis County. Oftentimes, I would probably say 99%. There might be one that there is drug use and drug abuse that has taken place, and I want to clarify too. When I say that someone has a home, I'm not saying that the solution is to give everyone a home.
No.
I'm saying work with people to a place to where you can help them be stable inside of a house. A house is part of the equation. It is not the equation. There's so many different things that we have to make sure that we help work people through, especially when they've had a drug-riddled life and been in that dark place. We've got to help them get out of that. And that's where we really need to bring back on the table involuntary treatment. That after 3 times you've been contacted by the police because you've had an episode because of drugs, I think that we need to put that back on the table to where, whether maybe it's not going to jail for drugs, but it's going to a treatment center, whether or not you want to go, but to put them in there. And I know that there still is involuntary treatment, but we really need to emphasize that and get the mental health and the drug treatment better funded, instead of just giving funds to homeless people to continue to live in that place. Put the money where the success is, where there's opportunity for people to get healthy, well, and whole.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me ask you this. have you or has this ever even come up, or are you familiar with this at all? I'm not super familiar with it, so I'm not coming from a place of knowing too much. But has it ever come up to have like an ibogaine treatment center?
Explain what that is.
So maybe we can pull that up. Ibogaine. There's I heard on Rogan, Rick Scott, former governor of Texas, and another gentleman who is from Kentucky, are kind of trying to spearhead this thing. But it's a treatment, and it has to be done under medical supervision. But the way that it works, just to kind of Cliff Notes version this thing, is it kind of repairs the damaged portions. And it does it within one treatment, like the numbers, especially for opioid use.
I listened to this episode.
Yeah, so yes. A lot. They've used it a lot with veterans that have come home in it, and so it does a lot of these things, whether it's PTSD or opioid use, or they have a lot of the similar damage to the brain, and so this has shown some promise to be able to repair those things and shortcut the process. Of if you let the body do it just naturally with nothing, it could take months or years. This can repair those things most of the way within one treatment. It's pretty dang interesting, and I don't know enough about it to know what the pitfalls are or what the complications would be to have it instituted. But they're talking about like 94% recovery rate after one dose, like after one treatment cycle. From opioid use, which is, and I'm probably getting these numbers wrong. I mean, just we'll try to get some accurate stuff up here in a second, but it's a very high success rate after just one treatment, and gives people a real solid foundation to build off of. Kind of removes that. I mean, because the relapse rate on opioids is unbelievably high, and it's just so hard to do. The whole. I'm somebody that I believe that self-control is highly overrated. It's like, do not put yourself in a position to have to rely on yourself to control yourself. One of the things I've talked to my kids about is like people who are successful at doing certain things, like remove all the barriers, establish systems that increase your probability of doing what you should. So don't put yourself in a compromising position, because the way you are as a human, you will most likely pick the wrong thing most of the time if it's up to you exclusively. You can set up guardrails all throughout the way you structure your life to keep yourself from doing really dumb things, but we always want to do dumb stuff.
Do you know how much it costs per
I
treatment?
don't.
See, I think that's the piece.
But I think it's really interesting, and I wonder if if that's something that has even been looked at or gamed out. I don't know what the costs are.
But I know that it would have to have some type of approval too, because I think when they were talking about it, that it was still not something that was like FDA approved. It hadn't gone through.
I know it's gaining traction in some areas, and I didn't know if, so I was curious if we'd ever even heard about it, or if it was
about it, but okay. But I don't think it's available, because let's just I would say the next best thing would be Sublocade, and Sublocade is so cost prohibitive. Right now, it's $2,000 a dose, and what Sublocade is, instead of you relying on taking a over-the-counter drug to keep you from doing illegal drugs like Suboxone or methadone or any of that, Sublocade, you get one shot a month, and you're done. You don't have to keep taking something, so it breaks that cycle. But it also now gets you to a place to where you have a month of being free, instead of worrying about where you're going to get your next hit. Well, let's figure out where I'm going to sleep tonight. Let's figure out how I'm going to be able to pay for food. And so you can start
thinking further down the road.
Right. And so, but the problem with that, it's $2,000 a dose, because it hasn't gone through that phase of time to where they can have generic ones made. And so it's so expensive at this point.
Yeah, so ibogaine is very expensive.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, it would be better to spend that $10,000 to get someone on that versus $10,000 to keep them homeless for a year and keep them in a place to where they're dependent on doing drugs. I agree, but I think it just right now it's so.
So let's and just kind of gaming this out. So let's say that's just not, and obviously it's not in the cards in the budget for us to just spearhead it on our own as a county. So what, as a voting public or as just a citizen, what are the kinds of things that you could do to move the ball? And I think politically, this is another one of the things that I think a lot is that we're so, and I don't know if I want to say especially conservatives, but they've been terrible at this. Like every play is a Hail Mary. It's like they only design plays that are supposed to go 100 yards, and they have not done a good job of going like, let's just get a first down. Right. Or maybe let's just get 4 yards and set up a more manageable second and third down. So how can we think a little more incrementally, just in general? And I mean, I don't, because it's going to take everybody, conservatives, libertarians, liberals, everybody's going to need to care enough about these folks and get enough on the same page to say, like, incrementally, what can we do that would actually make a dent in restoring these people to their families, to their lives, like living a life that they can be proud of. I mean, the amount of people that, every person, I believe very strongly has been created for a certain purpose. Mm-hmm. And every person who's not able to live that purpose out for a myriad of reasons is depriving the rest of the world of the gifts that they have. And if those people are allowed to pursue those things because these more short-term goals of getting high so they don't have to deal with the effects of that, or trying to find a warm place to sleep because it's cold and rainy out there right now, and that's a tough, golly, it's heartbreaking to see people.
That's why we have the shelter, and it has capacity of 80 people, and we only hit around 40 per night, and so there's plenty of capacity to not have to stay there. Now it's, during the day, that's a different story of where you're going to stay or what you're going to do, and that's just, it is what it is, but we do have a solution, especially just making sure that people have a warm place to sleep at night. Yeah,
and so there's that part. There's the addiction part, that we need to address.
Can you find out if this actually works with Tranq or fentanyl as well?
So obviously cost is a big issue, and it seems like there's a lot of money out there for these services. I don't know if it's that much,
But the problem is everyone gets a cut of the pie. So right. So every time let's say it goes to the county, well, they get administrative costs, Commerce gets administrative cost, and then the provider gets administrative cost, and then you can utilize the money. So
is that a challenge, just getting everybody on the same page is that one of the bigger issues?
And that's where we're trying to get more service providers, and we're getting service providers that are outside of our area to come in because they're actually having success at what they're doing. And so I think that, definitely something that I'm working on. It's going to get better, and we are making active steps to work on getting people to take baby steps, not a huge leap. Yeah. But if we can just get them moving forward, that would be great. And if we could get Sublocade and allow, whenever they go into drug treatment, they get a dose of that, or even at the jail, they get Sublocade, and you break that cycle of needing to take something every day. I think that would be a huge win. So if there was, a magic wand, I would have Sublocade, $10 a dose, and we would just be able to help people right out of the gate.
So,
but that's not going to work for Tranq, though. Tranq is something way more deadly. It rots you from the inside out. That's something that is now showing up in Seattle. I think there's been a case in Olympia, Spokane, and it just decomposes the body.
Yeah, I know a little bit about that. And obviously, I know some people in drug enforcement, and we've talked about some of these kinds of things, and we're looking to do some of that here. It's nasty stuff. And Yeah. Anyways, so when you talk about trying to get everybody on the same page, how do you actually go about building a team through that process? Because I know sometimes the laws that we have are cumbersome, and I think I always hate bringing this up because it's not that big of a deal, but like just being on the planning commission has been something that has given me a lot more grace for politicians. I remember being at like the first couple meetings, and I remember coming home and my wife being like, "So what is this thing like?" I'm like, if this is how politicians have to make decisions, like no wonder they're so terrible. Like it's a tough, when you're dealing in political areas and arenas, it's wild, the process, and everything's so slow. And I've kind of come to appreciate, because as somebody who works obviously in the business world more, and obviously as a developer, it's like you're used to being able to make unilateral decisions that get a thing done, as efficiently as you can figure out. Like you don't have a lot of the constraints. When you're a politician or you're dealing within the government structure, it's purposefully slow so that everybody gets some opportunity to be able to make sure these things get fleshed out, that all the voices that need to be involved can be involved. And so I've kind of come to appreciate that a little bit more about government. It's frustrating as all get out as a business person when you're trying to get a permit or you're trying to, and some of that stuff I do think has to be changed. It's unnecessarily slow, but there are parts where it's like you do have to put it through the paces, give everybody their opportunity to know about it, say something about it, catch it in time. So how difficult is that to have all those entities be necessary to bring an idea forward and to actually flesh something out, and do it within a term and within the terms of everybody else who's involved, and how many of those people are even elected? Walk me through that a little bit, like what that's like trying to get an idea that everybody goes, well, why don't they just put an ibogaine treatment in, or why don't they just this? Like how difficult is that, and how long is that process typically?
Well, you have to understand the philosophy that you want to operate under, and then go find people that would be willing, or organizations that would be willing to operate under that type of philosophy. Because right now what the state has set up, it's a total different idea. I mean, just think back to COVID, right?
Yeah.
Like the state had a way that it wanted you to operate, but we didn't want to operate here, so you have to figure out how to navigate around that. And I would say, just Department of Health is a very feel-good organization that just wants to, we feel bad, so we're just going to throw money at it, and there's no accountability, and you can read it in the contracts. Well, you've got to find organizations that are more geared towards wanting to find successful outcomes than to feel good about themselves. And so that's where we've had to, I've driven to Ellensburg to go visit an organization because we've heard things were being successful. I've gone out to Grays Harbor out in Aberdeen, and what they're doing, and I know that they have a high population of homeless people that are out there, but they are seeing great success in what they're doing. And so that's just, at every step and turn, how can we tweak, how can we get better, how are we improving, and just, every time the contracts come up, well, we need to figure out, I've proposed this idea that anytime that we re-up a contract, that an organization needs to come and explain exactly what they've done the last year, the success stories, and their plan moving forward, and justify why you need X amount of dollars. And so I think that's going to be helpful, because people are going to have to be more calculated, and this isn't business as usual. And I think that's, people can get in a rut because that, well, I'm just going to get this and we'll just keep doing what we're doing. There was a person at one point that was living in transitional housing, which is supposed to be 3 to 9 months. had been there over 9 years. That's not how the system is supposed to be
Right.
working. So
Yeah.
so slowly, I think we're working in that, and you've seen where I've probably, people have been upset about some different ordinances that I've put in place, working with other local electeds and jurisdictions. The RV parking or the loitering, because we want to try to take back those areas and let people know that this type of behavior is not going to be tolerated.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, no, I think, it's a gap that we're hoping to help bridge, is that, to do these things takes a lot of different pieces to implement all in kind of order.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes a long time, and it's not always obvious to everybody what you're even trying to do.
Right.
And there's a lot of, headline grabbing that goes on there. And when people are running elections, they just say all crazy stuff, or when people have a certain agenda, they just say crazy things and get people riled up. But, we're hoping people will kind of take some of this stuff and look at the broader view, because it's so damaging. What we do this as a country more and more is that we do these huge pendulum swings. We're like, we'll have this really conservative person, we'll have this really liberal person. We just go back and forth, and it's like, well, nothing can ever get done that way. I think obviously polling shows that the vast majority of people at their core are pretty moderate. The 80% in the middle is pretty moderate if you poll them. They will get wrapped up in all kinds of stuff, no question. But, they mostly want to go out, work their jobs, run their businesses, go on vacation. They just want to do the normal stuff.
Do you know that we have probably one of the most moderate presidents of our time right now?
100%. Well, and, I actually told somebody this recently, kind of about you, is that you have a little bit of that effect where you'll say something because you're thinking of a standard, and it comes off, maybe as harsh, and people will glom onto that. And the president has a very similar, except for he does it so much on purpose.
Right.
It's, and he just likes screwing with everybody. But then you actually look at the policies, and as it gets worked out, as the idea kind of runs through the process, it gets very moderate, it gets very reasonable. And so there's obviously, and I am not a big, I don't, and I don't want this to sound like some sort of a slight against the Chronicle or anything, but I just don't read newspapers in general. I don't really read a lot of news. I like to deep dive topics, from various sources, because it's just, same reason why we want to do this in the way that we're doing it. We want the idea to be fully fleshed out for people to know where it's coming from and where it's going. And you can't do that in a headline or a column very well. It's difficult. It's just a medium that's very challenging to get a lot of nuance. And as our issues get more nuanced, I think, nationally and globally and locally, they're very layered. Even even the term homeless is not a very good description of the actual issue.
Unhoused people.
Well, yeah, it's like you were talking about, what structure you live in doesn't describe the problem.
Right.
The problem is interpersonal relationship decline or elimination. They just become totally isolated and totally addicted. However that happened, and some of that you'll listen to stories and go, well, no wonder they had a horrible childhood. Sometimes it's bad decisions, or there's all kinds of ways that people end up in that spot. But, it doesn't really matter whether it's understandable or not. It's still not good for them. Mm-hmm. Whether you can understand, well, man, if I had been abused that way, or, and this is where the empathy people kind of get sidetracked, and we need empathetic people. I'm not as empathetic as my wife, but we need each other, because sometimes she needs somebody to go, look, the way you think you're helping that person is not actually helping them, and she'll move off that a little bit. And sometimes she'll go, you need to be a little more patient, or you need to be a little more, and we need each other for that stuff.
For sure.
I think for all the issues with two-party systems and them being so different, there is some value that I think if everybody was being realistic, that the other parties kind of core tenets, if they were distilled down to the more reasonable aspects of them, they help balance out what everybody's trying to do. And so I think, I've seen that with you, obviously. I've known you for a little while now, and it's, these headlines that come out, it's like, well, that's not what he thinks about that, or, but that happens with everybody. I mean, even, with Lindsay or anybody, it's like, there's some stuff that gets said, and it's like, well, I don't know that they think that exactly. I'm sure there's more to it than that, and we don't give each other enough leeway to explain ourselves, and we don't have a lot, especially, this is kind of how this thing started. It was like, I think it would be good for all of us if we could understand much more clearly what people are trying to do, why they're trying to do it, even if, nobody bats 1,000. I mean, I guarantee...
I guarantee I'm not batting 1,000.
Yeah, I was going to say, I guarantee that you ask any one of you commissioners if you have hit on every one of your ideas, everybody would go, no.
Yeah.
Like, we're trying to, and to not hold kind of circling back around, and I don't know, you probably need to get going. You got more time, or
a few more minutes?
Yeah, so we'll try to button this up. But one of the things that to kind of bring it back around to something we were talking about. Now I sidetracked myself, but go ahead.
Well, what I was going to say is, the best thing that we can do is just have conversations, and that's where, something that I really appreciate, because I made that statement about Trump, is that he actually brought in people with different ideas and value systems. I mean, think about RFK, right? He was running for the Democratic presidential candidate.
Yeah, lifelong Democrat.
Right, and then Tulsi Gabbard,
yeah.
Another Democrat. Her For Love of Country book,
yeah.
Incredible book. And
yeah.
I don't agree with, some of the different ideologies that she has.
Yeah.
But I can agree with like a lot of it. And it's just interesting. And just to put a plug in for the Chronicle, the reporter that covers my beat now, Jacob Moore, he's a great reporter. He calls balls and strikes, doesn't add his own opinion, and just hears the conversation, which is good. For a snapshot, that's what you want. You don't want to be swayed over to one side. But even, when people get up, they have this wild idea that I'm trying to hurt homeless people or something like that. I've actually reached out, like Ray Chapman Wilson. I tried to have a conversation with him, called him up, and he goes, no, I don't want to talk to you. You're just trying to get me to change my mind on things, and then just hung up. But then I've asked people, well, hey, let's just go meet. Let's go have lunch, and we can talk about the issues, whether it's homelessness or whatever they're upset about, and we'll set up the meeting, and I'm batting 1,000% each time they've canceled.
Yeah.
And that's we want to live in our own silos, and until we come out of those silos and have the discussions, because I'm also made better when I have those discussions, because maybe I have a blind spot, maybe I'm missing something, and then they can help tweak the idea and the concept of policy by just having a simple conversation. But that inability to talk is, it's, there's a guy that writes, after I do an op-ed, next day, he's got a letter to the editor.
Yeah.
And I've tried to have conversations with him, and just nothing ever materializes.
No,
until we can have what we're doing right here, just discussions, and get outside of our silos. I think that's, we're going to continue to see some of these problems, but the more locally that we can just talk, that's great. I mean, there was a guy that called me out, and he wanted to have a debate. Don't even know who the guy is. He had a sign. And I thought, no, can we have a conversation? Can we just talk? And maybe you have some ideas that maybe they're just skewed in your mind, and we can talk through, and maybe I'm missing something.
Yeah.
Even with the immigration piece, where I said that we're not a sanctuary county, and just, I know that I upset one of the city councilors, and then just being able to have a conversation with that person, I felt it put us on way better footing. But if we were able to have that conversation before we blow up, I think it really helps relationships moving forward.
Absolutely. I think it's so important, and almost all of us are missing something. I mean, whatever it is that we tend to be good at, we tend to lack in the opposite area. And I do think, when we're just talking about this, with all the, the feminist stuff, or now the pendulum swing that's happening with the anti-feminist group, it's like we are much better together than separate. And I think you can extrapolate that out into all the different ideas. I think if we can be honest people, have honest discussions, be willing to, whittle all these ideas down to their best parts, we are much better together than we are separated. I think, being able to attack these issues where it's not good versus evil, but we are, like I said, I think, and we can kind of button it up on this, I think there is something to be said about we almost all agree on the diagnosis.
Yeah.
We all see the issues. It's the prescriptions that we have trouble with, and because somebody's got a different prescription doesn't necessarily make them evil. It doesn't make them correct or incorrect, but it's always going to be better if we can whittle all those things down to the most productive parts. And we do need each other for that. We need people that are coming at it from different angles. I see this in groups that I'm involved in or management teams I've been a part of. The more, we can be like-minded in our philosophy, but have differing vantage points, it's always proven to be a real help. And so, I think, something that came to mind when you were talking about how people don't want to talk to you that disagree with you, there's that's, if you want to know if you have a good philosophy or if your ideas are stupid, just find out how willing you are to share them with somebody who doesn't think the same way. And if you're not willing to talk about it, that's probably a terrible idea.
Right.
You're afraid of how fragile it is. And it's, like that quote comes to mind, Maximus Aurelius, I think, or whatever his name was. Not the gladiator guy, but the other, the real guy. Right. I'm butchering the name, but he said, if you want to upset a strong man, tell him a lie. If you want to upset a weak man, tell him the truth. And I think man, that's true. Really, like if you are upset by something that's true, it probably means you got a weak ideology or there's something there that you're not confident in. And so, we'd love to. And there's so much stuff I would like to get to, but we'll be here all day. So you'll have to come back.
Yeah, just let me know.
But
I think this is great what you're doing.
I appreciate it. Yeah, awesome. Well, thanks for coming in, man.
Yeah.
All right.